little bit of a different episode today. I'm solo. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's about time. Lewis was holding you back. No, but seriously, Lewis isn't with me today. It's me on my own. He'll be back soon. So until then, you are stuck with me. But I've decided I'm going to take full advantage of that and talk about a film that I absolutely love. No drum roll. It's on the thumbnail. So Flight of the Navigator. It's not necessarily extremely well known. It's, an 80s film, so I watched as a kid. The basic story is that it's set initially in 1978 with a lad called David Freeman, who has a younger, bratty brother. It's that classic, there's not enough of an age gap where they are completely at different points in their lives, so they kind of not compete, but they bicker. It's a very bratty relationship that he has with his younger brother. It's David's birthday at the beginning, and the younger brother jumps out of the back of the station wagon to go and play with the Johnson twins, or the Johnson brothers, or at the Johnson's house, or whatever he does. David and his parents, they continue home. I think David's 12 in it, so his little brother's probably like, I don't know, 9, 10, maybe a little bit younger. It then fast forwards to sort of early evening, and David's parents ask David to go and get his little brother from his mate's house. As you can imagine, they don't get along, so David's like, oh, really? Have I got to do this? Who cares if he comes back? I think that's kind of like the relationship they have anyway. So off David pops. He jumps over a little wall, goes across a train tracks. We're not suggesting that anyone should ever do that, but he does in Flight of the Navigator. He gets a bit weirded out. There's a lot of toying with the audience from the camera shots and the angles and the directing and the music and the lighting, that, is there an alien in the forest or something like that? Is there a monster or something that's going on? David also picks up on this, grabs a branch and shouts, get back, Jack, I've got a gun. Because all 12-year-olds in America in the 1980s, well, actually, 1978, you'll understand why I made the mistake with the 80s thing in a second. Spoiler, 35-year-old film, who cares? So he shouts, Jack, get back, I've got a gun. I don't think anyone would have been convinced that David had a gun. David's little brother jumps out of the tree. I say jump out, he almost descends 50 Cent style from the air. I don't know where he was. Scares the shit out of David. And David shouts at him, you'll never see me on my birthday. He might actually shout that when he gets out of the station wagon in the beginning. However, that's a precursor to what's about to happen. David hears then, or senses something after his brother's run off, in a sort of ravine just near him. Again, it's quite dark, quite smoky, and it's very dark and very smoky in this ravine. And David's looking over the edge, grabs a branch to steady himself. Branch snaps, David falls down. There's almost like a helicopter whirling sound, and then a very purposefully change in atmosphere. Like the sound. It was filmed on 2 different days, but anyone who's ever done any sort of film audio recording, it's really good to get a background ambient sound. It makes blending from different takes and different days and different scenes. It's easier to blend them together with a bit of almost subconscious linking. They break that in this. And when David wakes up, it's very obvious as an audience member that's like, whoa, the tone has changed, the atmosphere has changed, the sound has changed in a weird way. What's happening here? David then makes his way back out of the ravine, canyon, whatever he's in, and goes home. Gets to his house, he's banging on the door, he thinks his brother's locked the door, he's like, you little shit. He doesn't swear in it, it's a young teenager's kid's film. He's banging on the door opens, there's an old lady there. David's visibly shook by this, like, who are you? And she's like, who are you? Anyway, he barges into the house, because, you do. Runs upstairs, goes to his bedroom. There's an old man in his bedroom. Which now, actually, in isolation, that sounds really perverted, but it's the husband of this old woman. The husband then says a weird line where it's like, calm down, son, calm down. In the UK, other people don't tend to call you son. Like when I was a kid, I never experienced that. So I was really thrown by that. That's not the same actor. Why is he calling me his son? Is it his son? I think it's a weird line choice when it's supposed to be establishing that David doesn't know who these people are, and these people don't know who David is, and then he refers to him as son. Just get rid of that line. Just go, calm down. Anyway, it's in there. David then reacts as a 12-year-old child, cowering on the stairs, crying. I'm not going to tell the whole story. Police turn up. They find a missing poster for David. Like, oh, we found him, brilliant, we'll take him to his parents. Yeah, but the poster says 1978. That was 8 years ago. They think, oh, it's a typo. And then it cuts to David being taken to his house. Now, the woman who plays David's mother, Veronica Cartwright, she was a child actor. She was in The Birds, but most people will remember her from the pilot in Ridley Scott's Alien. She's great in that, but in this, she's brilliant at capturing the slightly younger mother when David's in his original time. You know, she's full of joy. She's got 2 kids around her. She's, you know, loving life. She's living the American dream. Fast forward to 8 years later when David gets brought back to her. Her hair's scraped back. The actress has definitely made great physical choices to portray the older character, and the makeup department have really done a great way of draining her. It's meant to be 8 years later. She looks about 20 years older, and that's not a criticism. I'm not shitting on her at all. It's amazing. Without a scene telling us how heartbroken she's been thinking her son was dead for 8 years and how it's taken a massive toll on her physically, mentally, spiritually. We get all that just the way she's playing it. When she grabs hold of David, she's crying, laughing, all at the same time. And it's all portrayed, this last 8 years of emotion, I feel comes across while she's hugging David. It's absolutely brilliant, but heart-wrenching, obviously, because, you know, as an adult watching this film, I saw that. As a kid, I was like, oh, he's back and they're really happy, but they're a bit sad. Well, actually, no, it's a bit more than that. And they're really confused why he's not aged. NASA then get involved. Of course, why wouldn't NASA get involved? They want to take David, do a load of experiments on him. I say experiments, tests probably, that makes way more sense. To see what's happened. His parents are like, okay, we're a bit worried about it, but we'll let you do it. David's not happy. All while this is going on, an alien spaceship, and we're talking almost like what we think of an alien ship in a traditional old school sort of way. Silver flying saucer. That's crash landed. Coincidentally, that's been taken to NASA as well, because that's what you'd do if you had a spaceship. You'd keep it near where civilians are. I don't know why NASA seem to have so much power in this universe, where they can just take a ship that's crashed. Furthermore, David doesn't want to stay. His parents don't want him to stay. But then NASA go, no, he's staying for more tests, and that's fine. There seems to be no sort of government liaison here, or they don't have any power, but they do. I personally don't mind it. I think it's a really easy way to go. In this world, NASA are a bit shit. Not that I'm playing into the whole flat earth thing or anything, but NASA are a bit shit. Let's just pretend they've got government powers to arrest people, essentially. We're adding to the hour and a half runtime of this film just by putting in like a scene to explain that, and we don't need it. It'd ruin the pace. David then starts displaying they're doing like CAT scans, and, you know, his brain's hooked up to all sorts of stuff, star charts that he shouldn't have, and also a schematic of the ship. Now, he's never seen the ship, or at least NASA think he's never seen the ship. David doesn't remember seeing the ship. Spoiler, David's already seen the ship. It was the ship that took David from 1978 and dropped him back off Earth 8 years later in 1986. Shock horror. David then finds out that he's been kept there for longer. Hears a voice in a hangar calling to him. So he's like, right, I'm off. I'm going to go and see what this voice is. Finds the ship. The ship opens up. It's never opened up for anyone in NASA. David gets in and off he pops. And that's where the adventure starts. So that's, I was going to say brief. It wasn't very brief. I apologise for that. It was released in 1986. So it wasn't released in 1978 when the first part of the film is set, and then it's presuming what the future is going to be like. It was released in 1986. That's the 8 years later from 1978. It had a 9 million budget. It made back 18 million. So not, you know, it covered itself, but not massively. It's a weird film for me, in the respect that I watched it when I was a kid. I don't remember the first time I watched it. We had it, you know, on VHS, probably taped off the telly or something, you know, questionably illegal. You know, it wasn't me, it wasn't my dad. It was, you know, a family friend. We used to watch it to death when I was a kid. I still watch it probably once a year. Now I've only recently watched it. I put it up there in my mind's eye with Back to the Future, E.T., Indiana Jones, even Star Wars. And it wasn't till later in life when I was talking to actor friends of mine or other film, TV nerds. I was like, oh yeah, like Flight of the Navigator. And they're like, what? Flight of the Navigator? I've never heard of it. I was like, yeah, with, you know, Max and the ship. No? Nothing. No idea what I'm talking about. So And I think it's one of those things where as a kid, we've mentioned this on the pod before, you don't know what you don't know, and you only know the world that's presented right in front of you. And for me, this was a big film. No, I watched it a lot. That's why I'm very aware of it. It wasn't that big of a movie, really. It made an impact on me. I love the music in it, very 80s and synth. David wears a polo shirt in it, and I recently found a polo shirt that's very, very reminiscent of the polo shirt that David wears in it, and bought it just based on that. It's not like a kid's polo shirt, it's an adult's one, as I am an adult. Some interesting actors in it. Probably the most well-known one will be Sarah Jessica Parker. She plays Caitlin McAdams, she's quite a small part, but quite a pivotal one. She works for NASA, and she brings him his food, and she has this robot called Ralph that she says, Ralphie baby, that rolls around and brings the food and stuff. It also, David escapes inside that robot. But Sarah Jessica Parker makes friends with him. She's got a bit of a purple hair. She kind of briefly tells David about modern music like Twisted Sister. It's a him. Well, actually, it's a they. Lines from the film. Later on in the film, she also delivers a message to David's parents on behalf of David. And I've heard criticism of Sarah Jessica Parker regarding this film when she was asked, what drew you to this film? And she was like, well, I wasn't drawn to the film. It was a payday. And be like, oh, right, she doesn't even remember being in it. It's like, well, no, she was a jobbing actor. She wasn't Sarah Jessica Parker, known for, Sex and the City or Hocus Pocus. She was a jobbing actor, and she wasn't shitting on the film. She was just saying it was a paycheck. I've done stuff that I absolutely loved, and I've done stuff that, would I have done it if it wouldn't have been a paycheck, and that's not a criticism of anything, but it's a job. And I think she's in a lot of ways, she's really the heart and soul for David when he's away from his parents. And let's remember, he's away from his parents in the future, but they're not really the parents that he remembers. They're the closest facsimile to his parents, because they're 8 years older. So he needed someone on his side that wasn't going to totally remind him that he's in the wrong time zone, for want of a better way of putting it. And Caitlin McAdams, Sarah Jessica Parker's character, does that for him. So she is really good in it. She doesn't phone it in. She's really, really good. I've already mentioned Veronica Cartwright, but Paul Reubens is in it. Now, Paul Reubens isn't a super famous name, but his alter ego of Pee Wee Herman, that's quite well known. Pee Wee Herman's Funhouse, I think it might have been called, or Playhouse, that was, big at the time. He did the voice for Max, who's the ship. He is brilliant in it. Funny, emotive. Some of the conversations between him and David. Basically, Max is almost quite robotic in his personality until he gets the star charts out of David's head, scans him. But he also brings in parts of David's memories, and his memories result in his personality. So he almost adopts not David's personality, but a personality. A lot goofier and gigglier and sillier than David. But then he has got this complete bank of star charts and the alien species that made him. He's got all, their data. So he's very intelligent. And the pathos between the silliness and the heartfelt scenes between him and David, it really, really gets you. Well, it got me anyway. Paul Reubens' credit is credited as Paul Mall in it. I don't know if that's a joke somewhere. That it kind of rhymes. I don't know. I don't know why he's credited as that. But that's weird. I've actually seen a trailer for this movie where it's not Paul Reubens' voice doing the voice of Max, which makes me feel like there must have been somebody else doing the voice of Max during filming. Now, I'm under no illusion that when David was inside the ship acting, that Paul Reubens, or the actor who did the voice before Paul Reubens, was sat there doing the lines. But there would have been scenes and shots based on the interaction between those two voices, and David would have known what the voice was going to sound like. So did Paul Reubens' voiceover come in after the movie was completed? It actually gives more credence to how good Paul Reubens' voice acting is in it, that it almost completely reshapes that part of the film from my point of view. I'm going to talk about soundtrack. Music is a big thing for me. It's Alan Silvestri who does the music for Flight of the Navigator. He's probably his biggest piece of work, at least from my point of view, is Back to the Future. He did the music for that, and it was just before Flight of the Navigator. It's super synthy Flight of the Navigator music. I'll play you a little bit now. So very different from, the Back to the Future stuff where you had a full orchestra. I've read criticisms of, not necessarily criticisms, but they're saying that people say that the music really dates the film. But for me, 35 years later, I think it almost adds a new layer to it, because yes, it does date it, but guess what? David's also from a 8 years before. He's from a different age to the one that he's in now. And it's all about time travel and, more importantly, being stuck out of time or in the wrong time. So I think the soundtrack, the synthy stuff, it almost becomes more perfect for it now that it is all these years later. I often listen to the soundtrack from this film when I've got like bits and bobs to do, around the house, or I'm researching for the pod or something like that. Let's talk a little bit about the production side of it. So because of bad weather, it had to be moved to Florida for filming rather than LA, and that must have happened pretty early on, because there's lots of talks about Fort Lauderdale and stuff in the film. I know that a lot of the spaceship, or in fact all the spaceship interiors, were filmed in Norway. This is because it was originally a Viking film, the Viking film company, there was no Vikings. No Vikings were harmed in the making of this movie. But they went bust part way through, and Disney took over. They were reluctant to take over because they'd had a bit of a misfire with Return to Oz, maybe a year, 2 years beforehand. Again, I love that film. In fact, I really like the three odd or poorly received Disney films, which are Return to Oz, John Carter, and Flight of the Navigator. I love all three of those films, and I think I like them because they're very, very different. I'm a big Disney fan anyway, but I like them because they are so different. They had to film parts of it in Norway because it was contractually bound with the money of the film. I think it's actually quite a good thing that if a Norwegian company is going to put money into a film, it seems like part of the contract was like, well, you've got to film part of it in Norway, which means Norwegians get employed by it, and it helps their industry, not just the film industry, but the whole industry that is touched outside of that, which I think's quite nice. I've seen the ship in real life. It looks great. It was on the backlot tour in Florida. The ride closed. I never saw it, and the ship, and it's really like messed up. I found pictures online where it's rusted and falling apart a little bit. I've got a picture of it, and it's a little bit out of focus, which I didn't know at the time. I was on a moving cart train thing, so I thought I'd got a great picture of it. It turns out it's a little bit fuzzy, but it's my picture of it. I love it. So when the backlot tour closed, you can't see it anymore, which is absolutely gutting. They did have another version of the ship, and they've reused it, and they've painted it red, put some rockets on it, and stuck it above a refreshment stand in Future World in Disney. If you don't know, it's the Flight of the Navigator ship. If you don't know it's Max, it's just a ship, and it's fine. But if you're a fan of Flight of the Navigator, and you like the character of Max, who is the ship, he's kind of gutting a little bit to see it up there going, oh God, why did you do, how dare you do that to Max? He's a good lad. He's a nice guy. The film does a great thing of combining practical effects and CGI. Some of the practical effects are to do with the ship. They use cranes and then they superimpose smoke on it to get rid of the cranes. They use mirrors behind the camera to reflect certain parts of a hangar, so you couldn't see the crane of the ship, and they were very clever with the way they did it. And then there's a bit where David has a look through Max's collection of little aliens that he's got, the ones that have can't be sent home, one of them, because his planet's destroyed. And when Max has finished studying them, he's going to take them back to when he picked them up, so that they won't remember anything. He'll wipe the memories, and he'll send them back, so it's as if it never happened to them. Those puppets are great. There's a box in it, completely black box. David looks in it, and then this massive eye just pops out. It's a bit of a jump scare, and it got me when I was a kid, but it's great little moment in it. And then some ugly little alien just eats David's hat. I was going to say head then. That would have been a very different film. Don't think Disney would have been happy with that. Max, I talked about this, taking the other aliens home. Max says he can't take David home because it fries his brain. Fast forward to the end of the film, David basically realises that he can't live in this world because it's not the world he knows. And by the time he gets to his parents in Fort Lauderdale, his brother sets off all these fireworks. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna interrupt myself here. David's brother, the little bratty gimp from 1978. When David comes back, and it's 8 years later, the brother has this line: "You're my big little brother," or "You're my little big brother," or whatever, whichever way around it says. Again, he's only got a couple of scenes, but he comes across as such a good person. Again, maybe it's living with the fact that his parents, they've lost David, assumed he was dead for 8 years, and he had to grow up quick. But he just comes across as such a sound guy, and instantly he's like, "Yeah, you're David. I'm going to do everything I can. I don't know why you've been gone for 8 years. I don't know why you've not changed, but I'm going to do everything you need me to do." He says this thing where David says to him, "I want to get back to the house. It's in Fort Lauderdale, but I don't know where that is." His brother Jeff basically says, "Even if I have to set the house on fire, you'll find us." I mean, bit extreme reaction, Jeff, but the sentiment, "I'll do whatever you need me to do." Maybe he feels guilty about what happened, but he just really comes across as a sound lad. That's such a mank thing. He comes across as a really solid guy. That sounds even worse. Moving on. They use one of my favourite camera tricks in this, a contra zoom. There's two ways of doing a contra zoom. You either, on a dolly, physically roll the camera towards your subject, your actor, or your object, and while you're rolling the camera forward, you're zooming out. Or the opposite, you physically roll away from your subject while zooming in. So opposites. And what it ends up doing, it distorts the background. They use it a lot now in sci-fi to simulate or imply movement or change, or they'll use it in a way that someone has a realization. Probably the most famous one is in Jaws, where Sheriff Brody is sat on the beach and the first kid gets killed, I think, or it's very apparent that it's a shark. They do the contra zoom on the beach, which works brilliantly because you completely believe that Brody's having this realization, and they use it in Flight of the Navigator when the ship changes shape. The ship has the ability to change shape from this sort of your classic flying saucer into a bit more aerodynamic. Now, they use a lot of CGI for this, and it's really early CGI, but some of it looks good, some of it looks questionable. But considering it was 1986 when they did it, it's really quite impressive what they did. I think rather than just superimpose or CGI everything, they just CGI'd certain bits, and it's easier to forgive those small sections when the rest of it looks real, because it is real. A lot of the CGI that was made for this, the reflective, because it's a metal shiny ship, was later. It was almost the birth of stuff that came later for Terminator 2 Judgment Day with the Robert Patrick silver Terminator. It definitely started something. Jeffrey Kleiser did the CGI. He worked on the original Tron. He did a lot of the CGI in that. There's going to be a remake, let's be honest. It's going to happen. They've tried 2 or 3 times. Colin Trevorrow, he was linked to directing. Nothing's happened with that. I think the Jim Henson Company now own the rights, or at least the film rights to the movie, and they're talking about doing a version of it. I think from the puppet's point of view, that'd be brilliant, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't want them to do a remake. I love the original so much. I don't think it needs it. A little bit of a rewind to Joey Kramer. He plays David in it. He's brilliant. He really reminds me, from an acting point of view, of the lad in E.T. You fully believe everything that he goes through, and he gets to play such a massive range of highs and lows, and he's really, really good in it. He's had a questionable relationship with the law later in life, but if you look at him just in this film, he is really, really good. I feel like I say really, really good a lot. We've talked about this when, myself and Lewis, and we spoke about it on the pod before, is that this is not the pod to just come and shit all over everything. I want to talk about things that I really like and I'm really invested in. It doesn't necessarily mean that's always going to happen. Lewis will throw up films and TV shows, comics, books, and we will talk about them. So when I say he's really, really good, it's like, I feel like I need more descriptive words, but that's basically how it lands. Yeah, I think that was a nice mix of facts about the film, my own personal insights and connection to the film. So I think I'm going to leave it there. If you want to get in contact with us, go to @DRHpod on Instagram. Troller's on there. Lewis has put an open call out on there for that, so do that. Or in the comments on YouTube, please like, review, share, subscribe, all that normal clicky stuff that everyone talks about. If you could do that, that would be absolutely brilliant. And until next time, remember guys, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. Bye. Da 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 da.